Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are so glad that you are here to watch and learn another nugget of history from the 1950s. And that's what these fun chats are. They're just little nuggets that individuals have talked about and how they compile a wonderful history book for us. Would you think that's true, Jackie?
Yes, you're correct. And hello, everyone. Welcome. I always like to introduce you to the website that's going across the bottom of the screen, www.wildthewindmillwatch.com. A very good source of so much information concerning the hosts that you have today, the book, which is up in the right-hand corner that spurred this fun chat, where we'll be signing books, where our vendors are located. We have about 37 vendors now throughout a large area, and about all the previous 1950s fun chats. And this one is number 217. We have been doing this for 4 years now. Isn't that amazing? So
Yes.
there's a whole bunch of nuggets on our website.
Right.
So today, however, our guest will blend two topics: influences of growing up near the border of another country, and how a small farm girl developed into a woman of leadership. Now, Mary Gregoire was born in 1952 and grew up on a farm about a mile from the Canadian border near Portal in northwestern North Dakota. Portal is a port of entry into Canada for motor vehicles and for trains. Now, Mary earned a bachelor's degree in dietetics and a master's degree in food service management from North Dakota State University, and a doctorate degree in food service management from Kansas State University. Mary's career included a variety of administrative positions in hospital operations and in education, which included being director of food and nutrition services at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, the chair of the Department of Apparel and Education Studies and Hospitality Management at Iowa State University, an executive director of the Accreditation Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics. This has been a busy woman. Mary met her husband, Wayne, while at NDSU. That's North Dakota State University. His degree is in pharmacy, and that led to a career in retail pharmacy. And they have been blessed with a daughter and a son. So Mary and Wayne are now retired and live in Green Hills Retirement Community in Ames, Iowa. So, Mary, we welcome you to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Yes. Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
You're very welcome. So tell us how your family was affected by living near the border of another country.
Well, it was interesting. I knew there was another country that we bordered, but it really, going into Canada was not much different than going to Lignite or Columbus, which were neighboring towns in the U.S. Our farm was about a mile from the Canadian border. A good friend of mine at the next farm over, about a mile away, they lived right on the border. And so we'd often get together to, play at one house or the other. We'd ride our bikes back and forth on the country roads. But when we were at her place, we'd often go and jump across this imaginary line and say, oh, now we're in Canada.
Yes.
Driving to Portal from our farm, there was a road that ran right along the border. There was a ditch with telephone poles in the center of that ditch. And on the other side was another country road. And in my mind as a child, those phone poles must have been the border. Now, actually, I'm sure the border was maybe a little bit even north of those, closer to the other road, because I'm guessing those phone poles were for phones in the U.S. But anyway, to me, that was sort of the sign of the border.
Okay. Mary, when did you get phone service in Portal? Do you remember?
Well, as far as back as I can remember, we had a phone. I mean, it was a party line. You know, you had to pick up the phone before you pushed in the button to listen to see if anybody was on the line before you made a call. Um, but we had a phone as far back as I can remember.
Okay. Okay. And it was in all rural homes as well as in the town of Portal?
Yes, yes. So all of our farm neighbors were all on that same party line, as we called it. And so there were, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 different households that were all on that one phone line.
Okay. How did that phone become important to you as a youngster?
You know, I guess I was just trying to think how we made decisions when we were going to get together as friends, and it likely was that the moms called. I don't remember really hardly ever using the phone, but if you know, if I was going to bike over to see Marcia or Peggy or, you know, my friends that lived on neighboring farms, I'm sure there was a phone call that happened, but I don't remember using it as much. My mom was the one who typically would use the phone. We had one phone, and it was in Dad's den on the wall, but we just had one phone in the house.
Yes, yes. Okay.
So, how often did you and your family cross the border into Canada, which was not anything special, I guess? And how involved was that process? Because the passports were not required in those days.
Yeah, no, it really was not. We often went. You know, my dad probably more than us as kids, but, you know, for example, the curling rink, there was a town just north of the border, on the north side of the border, called North Portal, Canada, in Saskatchewan, Canada. And so those 2 towns were where the Border Patrol and the customs officials lived, along with other people in those communities. But the curling rink, for example, was in North Portal, and so my dad curled in the winter and would go. We had a coal burning furnace in our basement, and so Dad would have to go and get coal on a periodic basis, and the closest coal mine was in Canada. So we went back and forth. Once I was in band, the closest town for us, you know, we do a parade in our town, you know, for Memorial Day and 4th of July. But we often went to Estevan, Saskatchewan, which was about a half an hour away in Canada, as a bigger town for us to be able to march, you know, our marching band to be able to march in. My brother played baseball in Canada. There was a group that were from our small town and the neighboring town, and then they would go up to Estevan often to play baseball games, because there weren't, you know, enough that there were a lot of baseball teams to be able to play against, right in our small town.
Now, I think curling, the sport of curling, is very interesting, especially to U.S. citizens, because we don't do that in this country, do we?
I'm not aware, but I'll be honest. I've never, other than as a child being on the rink and trying to push those big stones.
Yes.
You know, I've never. But it was a popular sport, just as bowling. My dad also bowled, and there was a group of people from Canada who came down and were part of the bowling league in Lignite, which was a town about 11 miles away, had a bowling alley, and that's where they, you know, would bowl. But you had asked earlier, and I guess I didn't finish the thought. Going into Canada was really, I mean, they had the 2, you know, customs buildings, the U.S. and the Canadian customs buildings, and, you know, but everybody knew everybody. And so, you know, we'd pull up and the gentleman would come out who Dad knew, and they might chat a little bit. And, you know, I think he'd probably ask, oh, where are you guys headed today? And, you know, Dad would tell him, but it was really no big thing. And when we came back to the US side, they just waved, as we pulled up because, again, everyone. So it really wasn't to us, it didn't seem like any really big deal to go into Canada at all.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned your dad going into Canada to bring home coal that you would use. Okay. And yet you were close to the town of Lignite, North Dakota. Were there coal mines there that you could purchase?
No, the closest coal mine in the US was down near Noonan, which was straight west of us on the way to Crosby. Crosby was probably, it was about 45 miles away. That's where the closest hospital was. That was where I was born. But the closest coal mine was actually in Canada, just north in Saskatchewan.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you happen to know if that coal mine is still operating?
Oh, I sure don't. No, we switched to propane probably when I was in, I don't know, 5th, 6th grade. They had the house, and then we moved to propane. So we had coal when I was much younger, but eventually the house did run on propane instead of coal.
Yep. Yeah. We experienced the same thing.
Right.
Yes.
It was cleaner too.
Yeah. Well, you said Crosby was the closest bigger town in North Dakota? Yeah. Okay. And then was there a larger town in North Dakota where you would travel for purchasing other?
So Minot, which was it was a 2-hour drive, so I'm guessing it was probably about 100 miles away, was the closest big town in North Dakota for us. And so, most of our clothes Mom bought through the catalog, the Sears or Montgomery Ward's catalogs. But every fall, that was always our big trip. They'd put all of us, there were 5 of us kids in the car, and we would go for our new pair of shoes for the year. And so we'd drive, and on the way in a small town about, I don't know, probably 10, 15 minutes out of Minot, there was a town called, I believe it was Donnybrook, that had a cafe called the Speedway Cafe. And we'd get to go into the Speedway Cafe. They had a corner booth, so Mom and Dad could get us kids all pushed into the seats, and we couldn't easily get out. And we'd get hamburgers and milkshakes. Oh my gosh, that was such a treat. But then we'd go into Minot, and we'd go to D&S Bootery, which was the place to buy shoes, good shoes. And Mom would take us kids one at a time. The other kids would stay in the car with Dad, and Mom would take us in, and you'd go to the little X-ray machine, and get to see your feet, and then they'd fit you, and you'd get to get a new pair of shoes. And then you'd go back to the car, and then the next child would go in, and then when we were all done, then Dad would go in and pay the bill. I don't really remember doing a lot of other shopping in Minot, although I know I had some, like Sunday clothes that I'm guessing maybe we went to a store in Minot, and that's where those were purchased. We did make some of our clothes, but most of the things I wore were things that we bought, from the catalog.
Sure. And did you ever go to the state fair at Minot?
We did not. We went to the county fair, Bowbells, which was probably about 30 miles away, is where we were in Burke County. And the Burke County Fair, the county seat for Burke County was in Bowbells. And that's where the county fair. But we went to the county fair, and as I, participated in, and my siblings in 4-H, then, that's where we would have things, on display. But mine, it was a big trip. That was over 2-hour kind of a drive one way. And so we really didn't, the only major trip I remember going to Minot was our trip in the fall to get shoes.
Okay. And so you would get shoes, school shoes or dress shoes? Or?
Yeah, school shoes, because those were, sturdier. I always had a pair of dress shoes, but I'm not so sure, but what those might not have come from the catalog. The shoes I remember buying were, the more sturdy kind of shoes that were going to get worn every day to school.
Yeah. So then 4-H, were there members, were Canadian members who also joined your 4-H club?
There were not. It was all just, kids from the neighboring farms that were part of it.
So you mentioned farm. What kind of a farm did you have? Is it diversified?
It was, it was primarily grains. Hard red wheat, Durham wheat was, the primary crop. And then, it was interesting because at that point they did, they rotated crops. And so in the off years, it would be oats or flax. And back then, my dad would joke in his later years that, you couldn't hardly give flax away. And, now that's really more predominant crop in North Dakota, I think, than wheat.
And it's so beautiful when it blooms.
Yeah, that and canola. When you go to North Dakota now, it's so interesting because the landscape in the summer looks so different from what it looked when we grew up with the kinds of things that are growing. But yeah, the yellow fields of canola and the blue fields of flax are
really sunflowers.
Beautiful. And sunflowers, yeah. None of those were, ours were all grains. And then we had some cattle that we'd sell off the steers in the fall, and then the female cows would stay in the feedlot over the winter. We had a feedlot in our yard, and so Dad put up hay and straw, and they were there, and then they went out to pasture, and he and a neighbor would share a bull that they'd bring in the spring with the so we had that, but we didn't have chickens, we didn't have pigs. It was really just cows. We had a milk cow, a brown Swiss milk cow that Dad was very proud of. So our milk came from our milk cow.
Did you ever have to milk her?
No. We were what I would call the very typical farm family. I was the oldest child, female, and that meant my role was in the house helping mom. And my brother's roles were outside helping Dad. And so, we did things, I was involved in cooking and cleaning and laundry and, all of the kinds of things that would go on, watching the younger kids. And my brothers, as they got older, were the ones who drove the tractor, and did the outside kind of work.
How did that work that you learned to do in your home in the 1950s influence what your college study decision would be?
Yeah, so, both of my parents had college degrees. My mom was a nurse and my dad had a degree in accounting. And so education was very important to them. So there was never a question of whether we would go on to college or not. We would. And it was just really a matter of what we did. And the reality was, when I was getting ready to go off to college, there were, I would say, 3 primary majors that females were sort of directed towards. It was nursing, teaching, or home economics. And I really enjoyed, I did a lot of the cooking at home, canning, gardening, all of those types of things were all part of. And I really enjoyed doing that. My mom was an excellent baker, particularly. She was the kind who could tell by looking at something or feeling it, on the bread dough, if it needed any more flour worked in. And, she used to make a boiled frosting that then had to set and get beat by hand. And she knew just when it was done boiling and just when you needed to start beating it. I never did quite pick up those skills, but I did enjoy cooking. And so I knew I wanted to do something with cooking, so that I went off to college thinking I would go into something in home economics. And the only career I could really think of going to college was probably extension, because we had a county extension agent who helped with 4-H. And so I had seen a person in that role, and I knew they worked with food, at the county fairs, and they came and bought things. But when I got to college, my freshman year, they had a seminar where they introduced all of the majors that were in the college. And one of the majors they introduced was the field of dietetics, which included both food service and running food service operations, overseeing people who prepare food, preparing food, as well as nutrition. And so I thought, well, that sounded like something I might like. So I shifted then into dietetics, and that's then what I did and at that point, and still, dietetics was a field that at the time I went into the field, it was about half and half with food service management and nutrition. I would say now it's probably more 75% nutrition, 25% food service management. But I really was attracted to the food service side. I worked in a hospital initially as a dietary aide who delivered trays to patients, and then moved into the role of production supervisor and oversaw the menus, the production scheduling, making the food both for the patients as well as for the people who ate in the cafeteria. And my husband, Wayne, was in pharmacy, and pharmacy was a 5-year program where dietetics was only 4. In dietetics, in order to become a registered dietitian, after completing your undergraduate work, you had to do, most commonly, what was called a dietetic internship. You had to go to another facility that had been accredited to do that work. But they also offered an option where you could get your master's degree and do approved work experience. And so since I was working at the hospital, the dietitians there agreed to do the work that needed to be done to give me the opportunities to do the clinical side. I was really already doing the food service side in the role that I had at the hospital. So that's what I did then. I stayed on and worked on my master's. Wayne and I weren't yet engaged, but we're pretty serious at that point. And so I really didn't want to leave to go someplace else for an internship. So I got my master's and was able to do the pre-planned experience, and then took the registration exam then that next year.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you had a plan and you were focused.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mary, did you have to plan the meals then too?
Yes. So we had what we called cycle menus. And so, that would be, we ran on a month-long cycle menu at the time that I was there. And it was, back at that point, the food you served in the cafeteria, for the most part, was the same as what you were serving patients. And so, we had a selective menu. There were typically 2 entrees and, sides and salads and desserts. But pretty much, we might have an additional item we might prepare for the cafeteria. But for the most part, it was those same foods that were on the general diet that were served in the cafeteria. But yes, so I planned those menus, ordered the food, did the production schedules of what needed to get done on a daily basis.
Was your meal planning determined by budget?
That was one of the factors. I mean, it was budget, it was nutrient content, it was, the appearance of food. You didn't want to do a meal that was chicken, mashed potatoes, corn, that was all one color kind of thing. So there were a lot of things,
No Norwegian meals.
Went into putting those meals together.
When you were a high school student, did you know that NDSU was going to be your school of choice, or how did you make that decision?
Well, actually, while I was in high school, I spent the summer with a friend of mine in Montana at her cousin's ranch. And she really wanted to go to Montana State to college. And so I really was making a big case that, I really wanted to go to Montana State, with her. It'd be a great place. I could go into home economics there. So my parents, we did a road trip. We went out to Montana State. We looked at the facilities, met with the faculty, and then we went to North Dakota State because that was in state. My dad was really pretty sure that he I was going to be going in state. You know, he really wasn't very enamored with the idea of
Mhm.
out of state tuition.
Mhm.
And the facilities at North Dakota State were really much better. They had newer facilities, and so then it just became a you know, sort of a, you will go to North
Yeah.
Mhm.
Dakota State.
Yeah.
That's where you'll
Yeah.
go. Although I say that by that point we had actually moved into Minot because the small towns were getting smaller. They were starting to consolidate schools. We were going to have to ride the bus for almost an hour
Mm.
to get to the schools. They were closing the schools in Portal. And so they moved to Minot so we could be by schools. And Minot had a college, Minot State. It was called Minot State Teachers College at that point. I think it's
Mhm.
now Minot State University.
Mhm.
And that was where my dad had gotten his degree, his accounting degree. And so he firmly believed that we should all be able to do at least 2 years at Minot State before we
Oh.
went on to college.
Mhm.
The reality is none of us kids ever took a course there, but you know,
Yeah.
that was his original plan. But no, it was really pretty much a given I would go to an in-state school, and that's where I went. And since I wanted to go into home economics, North Dakota State was really the only option.
Sure.
Right. So did
Sure.
your father ever use his degree? Did he leave the farm, sell the farm, and then when he moved to Minot?
No. We went back and forth.
Oh,
We
okay.
rented out the farmhouse actually to Border Patrol people.
Okay.
And to live in, and but no, we'd go back and forth. He had a trailer and we had a tent, and so he
Ah.
farmed
Oh,
the land until he retired. He would
uh-huh.
go back and forth and farm
I
up
see.
there. And
Okay.
so no, I would say, you know, he used his accounting degree in how he managed, you know,
Mhm.
the finances and the
Yep.
farm.
Mhm.
But yeah, he was a strong proponent of education. And as I said,
Mhm.
it was really a given that you would go, you know, could pick what you wanted to go into. But,
Yep.
Mhm.
and my parents strongly encouraged, you know, me then going on and working on my
Mhm.
master's, and were very excited when, you know, a few years later I chose to go back and work on my doctorate. They were just really strong proponents of education.
So what about the rest of your siblings? Do they all have degrees as well?
They do. My brother, who's the next one in line, is
Mhm.
now retired, but was a surgeon. So he went
Mhm.
into medicine and became a surgeon. Um, my sister,
Mhm.
my mom had gone to what was nursing college run by St. Alexis
Mhm.
Hospital at the
In
time. She
Bismarck.
became a nurse. And that eventually merged with what was first Mary College. It's now Mary University in Bismarck. And so my
Yeah.
sister went there and got her degree. Then my brother got a degree, and my next brother um, got a degree in accounting and then went on to law school. And so he um, was a lawyer and accountant with a couple different, he was with Arthur Anderson and Deloitte and Touche, handled really large, they live in the Twin Cities area. And then he ended his career actually as the CEO of a large foundation, the Martha Cargill Foundation out of Minneapolis. And then my youngest brother also went into accounting, and he started out as the accountant at a print shop and really learned the printing business, and then went on. They moved out to the state of Washington, and eventually then bought his own printing company and ran a printing company until he retired about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah,
What a legacy for for your parents.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Mary, I'd like to go back when you were living on the farm. And do you recall any blizzards of what the
Yeah,
time that you grew up?
yes, yeah. And so we would get definitely blizzards. We occasionally would lose power. And for us, what losing power meant, not only you didn't have any lights, but our furnace had a hopper that had a motor that then fed the coal into the furnace.
Oh,
Excuse
okay.
me.
Mhm.
And when the power went out, that meant that you had to go down and stoke the furnace. You had to shovel coal in to keep
Sure.
it burning.
Mhm.
But we would all move into, when the power would go out, we'd move into the living room, which was on the south side of the house. So that north wind that we was
Mm.
the furthest from, and then that's kind of where we'd camp out, was in
Mhm.
that room. But I can remember several times. So we lived on, I mean, it was a gravel road. It was a 2-lane road, but just barely a 2-lane road. A mile down was a more permanent gravel road, that
Mhm.
actually had shoulders on the side of it. But in the snowstorms, our road was often, the last ones plowed, because it wasn't a major road. It was a more minor road to get
Mhm.
by our farm. So we'd get on the tractor, and Dad would drive across the field down the mile, so we weren't getting to stay home if it was snowing. If the bus was running, we were going to be on that bus, but it often meant that we had to get on the tractor, drive a mile through the field down to catch it at the neighbors that lived a mile down the road.
Okay. I think it was rare when we ever missed school because of a blizzard. The,
Right.
Yeah.
the only
Oh,
one
yeah.
I can recall was maybe the blizzard of 1966 when that happened.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I don't remember ever staying home. I just remember sometimes it was more challenging than others to get to the bus, but otherwise, yeah, you just,
Mhm.
that was just part of it, and you did go to school.
Yeah.
Did your dad ever need to tie a rope from your house to the barn or where he was needing to go to do chores?
I don't recall that we ever had that. I mean, um, the only thing that really needed to be I mean, we'd put hay down every day and feed in for the cattle. That was a kind of a once a day sort of thing. Was the
Mhm.
milk cow getting milked?
Oh, yeah.
But I don't remember having a cord.
Hmm.
But I know he talks about growing up, and they had it
Mhm.
from their farmhouse to the barn.
Did you ever make snow forts or snow angels?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh
Did you
yeah.
play Fox and Goose at
No,
school?
I don't remember playing Fox and Goose, but we did play a lot of outdoor. We had outdoor recess
Mhm.
year round,
Yeah.
and so yes, you did. And I can remember there was always a snowball fight going on, um, until
Hmm.
the teachers somebody caught us, and
Yep, yep. Well, it was quite a time. And Christmas, did you cut down your own tree? Your own
Were
Christmas?
there trees up there?
no, the only trees were trees that we planted. So, for example,
Yeah.
I can remember as a young child, one of the conservation practices. My dad always grew certified seed, and he was,
Mhm.
very involved with North Dakota State, and conservation and practices. And anyway, shelter belts were
Mm,
Yes.
were something that were really recommended. And so
mhm.
we had trees planted on the north and west side of the house,
Yep.
Mhm.
um, 5 rows of trees that circled that. I mean, so I'm sure it was probably at least a half a mile in total distance, if not longer.
Mhm.
But our job, the 3 oldest of us kids, our job was to weed between those trees. So
Oh,
Dad could run the tractor with the plow between the rows, but
Mhm.
between the trees where the weeds grew. So we each had our assigned rows that we had to go and pull weeds for
Mhm.
all
yeah.
summer long. But that was our only trees. So no, our tree, Dad would have gone into town someplace and gotten a tree,
Mhm.
at some local place.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
So, let's talk about how growing up on a farm helped shape you for leadership positions. Now, you're the oldest of all your siblings. That may have played into it, or maybe something else.
Yeah, no, I would say I'm sure that that was part of it,
Mhm,
because I was given a lot of responsibilities
mhm,
and needed to carry them out. It might be that I was responsible for making
mhm.
some of the stuff for supper, or it might be that I was responsible for working with my younger siblings on their homework, or some of the work that they were doing. Um, but I think another piece of it probably was, we played a lot of games growing up,
Yeah.
and
Mhm,
puzzles, and I've always loved puzzles. And one of the things that I've learned over the years about leadership is it really is like solving a puzzle. It's finding out how the people need to work together to create this whole. It looking at different ways, and what do you look at, what are the connections, are you looking at
yes.
color, are you looking at shapes? But I think some of that, another piece that has always stuck in my mind, um, our school was two grades together, so first and second were together,
Mhm.
third and fourth were together, fifth and sixth, and Mrs. Nelson was our teacher for fifth and sixth grade. And every Friday, she did what she called math races. And so two people would be up in the front, and she would give this story. Farmer Jones went to the market and he bought 6 apples and 10 oranges, and on the way home he ran into so and so, and he gave them so many of the apples, and then did this, and then he realized that maybe he gave away too many, he should go back, and he went back and bought X. So it would be this long kind of drawn out, and then in the end she'd say, and so how many apples did he have?
Yeah.
And then you turn around and write your answer on the board. But again, it was sort of that problem solving, it was
Yeah.
listening, and being
Yes.
able to do that work in your head. And so
Mhm.
there were a lot of those things early on. And then as I went into the field of dietetics, I really enjoyed that management piece. While I was in school, I was the supervisor for production, and I was the one making decisions and taking input, but deciding things. And that continued. I started my career as a food service director at a small hospital, 80-bed hospital, running the department and doing budgets and human resources. And I really enjoyed that. And so
Mhm.
when I went back for my doctorate, I went into that field thinking I wanted to teach. And I did. I enjoyed teaching, I enjoyed working with students. Um, but then I missed operations. And so then I went back, and that's when I was food service director for, Rush University Medical Center, an 800-bed medical center. We did patient food service, the cafeteria, you know, all of those things. And so, um, and then I missed education. So then I came back into education, and came here to Iowa State and was department head. But each of those, each position I held really throughout my career had a leadership component, a management component, and I
Mhm.
really liked that. I liked working with people. I liked problem solving, the setting goals and finding out ways that we could work to achieve those. But I think it all really did go back to some of the things that happened when I was a young child.
Sure.
Because I was given lots of
Yeah.
responsibilities, and allowed to make some decisions early on.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yes.
That's a
Well,
good.
Mary, we're about the end of our fun chat, and it's
Mhm.
been just wonderful to be able to have this visit with you. We are neighbors and next door neighbors, so it's I knew some of this information, but you expounded on it, and it helps me understand our relationship as neighbors and our relationship as North Dakotans and
Yeah.
graduates of NDSU, College of Home Economics. So we
Mhm.
do thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank
Mhm.
you so much. I enjoyed it.
Good.
Good. It certainly has been a pleasure having you here. And audience, we ask you to tell your friends and even your relatives about this 1950s fun chat. You may learn something. So until then, toodaloo.